Welcome to The Deep Dive, the show where we cut through the noise and get straight to the insights you need. Today, we're plunging into a topic that touches every single one of us: water. It's essential, obviously, a finite resource, and it's intrinsically linked to, well, everything: planetary health, community prosperity. But the water sector faces this complex web of challenges. Aging infrastructure, the pressures of the climate emergency. It's a lot. Our Deep Dive today explores a concept proposed as a powerful antidote: open water. So what exactly do we mean by open water? It's more than just a catchphrase. It's really a concept, an approach, a different way of working. It draws from this open philosophy, transparency, collaboration, sharing information freely rather than competitively guarding it like you see in so many other industries. So our mission here is to explore why the water sector specifically is so well positioned for this open water idea. What does it actually look like in practical terms? And crucially, how can it deliver real benefits to all of us?
Yeah, and what's really fascinating here is how this open philosophy aims to speed up innovation, improve accessibility, and just create value through collective effort. And this is in an industry that's absolutely vital to every single person on the planet. It's about how we manage something fundamental to survival together.
That is fascinating, open water. But my first thought is, doesn't competition usually drive innovation? Why would the water sector, of all places, benefit more from openness? Compared to maybe a tech startup or something? It seems a bit counterintuitive.
That's a really good question, and it gets right to the heart of why water is, well, unique. The water sector has these very distinct natural monopoly characteristics. They fundamentally limit traditional competition. So, for instance, many water supply and treatment services, they're managed by public utilities. Often these operate as regulated public monopolies. They've got guaranteed customers, government oversight. They aren't really fighting for customers like, say, a phone company would. And then there's heavy regulation, standards for water quality, pricing, infrastructure. It really limits new competitors from even getting started. Plus, water supply, sanitation, these are incredibly sensitive social and political issues. If something goes wrong, the public health impact can be massive. So governments, they tend to prioritize stability over fostering competition. And water resources are geographically specific, systems are integrated, interdependent. It makes it really hard for someone new to just jump into one part of the chain. And finally, the infrastructure. It needs huge ongoing investment. That's just less attractive for businesses looking for quick short-term gains. So all these things together, they really reduce those typical competitive pressures you see elsewhere.
Okay, I see. So the usual market forces, they're not really the main driver here. But doesn't that lack of pressure risk things getting a bit stagnant? Complacent even? How does open water then drive innovation?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, these limits on competition, they aren't necessarily a weakness. Actually, they present this unique opportunity for real openness and collaboration. The sector isn't constrained by guarding competitive advantages in the same way, say, a tech company might be. And that removes a really significant barrier to sharing ideas and ultimately innovating.
And we see the cost of not doing that right now, don't we? There's quite a lot of inefficiency. You hear about utilities independently developing solutions for common problems, like how do you classify different water assets? It's like everyone's reinventing the wheel, which is almost funny when you think about it in an industry focused on efficiency. Doing that, if they just adopted a shared best practice approach for defining and categorizing assets, imagine the time and resources they could save. Efficiency across the board. Okay, so with that unique context set, let's dive into the first pillar of open water.data. And what Northumbrian Water Group in the UK did was something called data hacks. That sounds really interesting.
Yeah, data hacks are basically orchestrated events. You invite external people, teams, to analyze internal data, but in a secure environment, looking for new insights. Northumbrian Water Group, their first one was about 7 years ago. They had around 100 people analyzing 10 years of pollution incident data just over a weekend. And the insights they got, transformational. Apparently, NWG moved from being almost the worst in the industry for pollution incidents to being among the best. That's a clear, measurable impact right there.
Wow. Okay, so building on that success, NWG is now leading STREAM. That's an open data initiative, right? Supported by Ofwat, the regulator in England and Wales, and involving, 13 out of 17 water companies across Britain. And the aim is to unlock the value in water data by removing barriers, creating a repeatable, scalable way to share data with innovators with the public.
Exactly. And initiatives like STREAM are needed for several critical reasons, especially now with the climate emergency. First, just keeping pace with climate change. Extreme events, intense storms, reduced supply, they demand faster adaptation, faster innovation. Open data can help drive the performance improvements needed for resilient water services. There's a real urgency, for water companies to collaborate and innovate more quickly to meet these climate challenges. Open data can unlock that speed. Second, pooled data sets. They don't just give you more data, they unlock stronger correlations. They dramatically enhance decision-making. Imagine knowing a pipe's about to burst days ahead or pinpointing contamination in minutes just because companies are sharing their collective intelligence. Larger data sets reveal clearer patterns, climate impacts, customer behavior, infrastructure aging. They train machine learning models better, predicting failures or contamination. And national-scale data can highlight regional differences, underpin policy much more precisely. Third, it sparks cross-sector insights. Water challenges often go beyond just the water sector. Like the fact that 18% of UK household energy use is just from heating water, that's a clear cross-sector problem, right? And finally, there's a growing regulatory push. Regulators like Omawat are increasingly requiring open data and collaboration.
Okay, but even with all those upsides, Stream still has to overcome some pretty big challenges, I imagine. Data security, privacies. Those must be top concerns, especially with personal information, PII, or data about critical national infrastructure, CNI. How are they tackling that?
Right, that's crucial. Stream is using the Open Data Institute's data spectrum. It ranges from confidential internal data right through to fully open public data. And they're developing a value framework, a kind of triage process. You need clear justification for any data that can't be made open.
And what about standardization? Getting everyone's data to talk to each other must be tough. Different formats, quality, definitions.
Oh, absolutely. That's another major hurdle. Data standardization, interoperability, inconsistencies in structure, format, quality, even the words use the semantics. It makes it hard to compare, as they say, apples with pears.
Wow.
That process is really time and resource intensive, but it's critical. So Stream is actively defining common data standards, building a shared trust framework.
Okay. And then there's the human element, right? Making sure people can actually use and interpret the data correctly.
Yes, exactly. Data skills and interpretation support. There's a risk of misinterpretation, drawing false conclusions if you don't have the right background knowledge or robust metadata. So building data literacy across the whole sector is really key here.
So given all those challenges, security, standards, skills, it raises the question, doesn't it? How brave is Stream actually willing to be? How open will they really go?
Well, this is where it gets really interesting. Their plan, apparently, is to publish, and get this, one of our toughest data sets first, sewage overflow data. They plan to do that at the beginning of 2024.
Wow. Sewage overflow data first. They must be anticipating some serious public scrutiny.
Oh, I'm sure it'll certainly be uncomfortable. But they believe in the long-term value. For the sector, for the public, it shows a real, tangible commitment to this open philosophy, I think.
Okay, that's a powerful statement. Let's transition now to the second pillar, open source software. So what does this all mean for you, the listener, and how does open source specifically drive innovation in water management?
Well, you can think of open source software development as this kind of virtuous cycle, sometimes called an open source loop of reciprocity. Usually starts with an idea, some motivation, then initial development, a public release, then comes collaboration, contributions from a whole community of users and developers. That leads to publicity, adoption, the software matures, expands. But the key is ongoing maintenance, sustainability, community building, governance, good documentation, education. And then the loop kind of revisits and renews itself, often pulling in newer technologies and ideas along the way.
And the benefits of that cycle for the water sector, they seem pretty significant.
Oh, immense. It allows for quicker innovation for those climate challenges we talked about. Collective problem solving means faster solutions. It offers incredible flexibility for local needs. Users can actually modify the software for their specific geography or unique infrastructure. And crucially, it's cost-effective, accessible. It empowers communities, smaller utilities, maybe those with limited resources who just can't afford expensive proprietary tools.
Right, and it's not like this is totally new to water, is it?
No, not at all. What's fascinating here is that much of today's water management software, whether it's proprietary or not, it already exists and thrives because of open source foundations. It's underpinning a lot of solutions already in use.
Like EpiNet, maybe, for modeling water distribution?
Yeah.
And SWMM for stormwater? I think I've heard of those.
Exactly. EpiNet and SWMM. Both are public domain open source software, originally developed by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA. Dr. Louis Rossman's development of EpiNet back in the 90s, that really leveled the playing field. It provided accessible simulation tools to everyone, developing nations, smaller utilities. It democratized access to critical engineering capabilities.
Okay, so water benefits from these tools.
Yeah.
But it sounds like the sector maybe isn't as active in developing open source as other industries. Why is it lagging behind?
That's a fair point. While the sector uses these tools, we have to ask, why is it behind others in building a really strong open source culture? Tools like APNet, they can be very slow to develop, sometimes a decade between major releases. And that's because the sector doesn't really mirror how, say, the tech giants, Facebook, Google, Apple, how they fund and continuously develop core open source software that benefits their entire industries. There just isn't the same kind of institutional investment, generally speaking.
So it comes down to funding models partly, and maybe just awareness.
I think so. Other sectors show how it can be done sustainably. QGIS, the open source mapping software, it's hugely popular, uses a sustaining membership program. Blender, the 3D graphics suite, funded by individual donations, corporate memberships.
Right.
But it's also just about raising awareness, highlighting the great work that is being done in open source projects, promoting open standards so the industry can kind of band together, recognize it, support it collectively.
Are there examples of that open source loop happening now in water?
Yes, definitely. And it's quite inspiring. Take Luke Butler's EpiNet.js. It's a JavaScript version of EpiNet. It lets you run hydraulic simulations right in a web browser. That's a game changer. Makes powerful tools accessible to anyone with a browser. No complex software installs needed.
That sounds incredibly useful.
It is. Luke published it open source. Then Cadium, which is a major water management platform, they started using it. They found some issues, some bugs, and they contributed code back to Luke's project to fix them. That iterative collaboration improved EpiNet.js for everyone. It's that perfect reciprocal cycle, that shared improvement in action.
That's a great example, and that links to Cadium Labs and the Cadium SDK, doesn't it? The software development kit.
Exactly. Those initiatives are designed to keep experimenting with open source standards. The SDK, it basically gives different users, utilities, coders, consultants, researchers, even other software vendors, the tools to customize and extend the Cadium platform for their own unique needs.
So they can adapt it, connect it to other things.
Yeah.
Precisely. Adapt it for specific geographies, connect it to existing proprietary software they might have, experiment with totally new algorithms.
The SDK is so exciting because it empowers so many users, lets them use their talents to organically grow this foundational tool, maybe in ways Cadium themselves hadn't even imagined. It's a real democratization of innovation.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, overcoming those fears, the hesitation about opening up data, opening up software, it's a critical step. And often, it boils down to human problems, not just technology ones.
Absolutely. Water is inherently an ecosystem challenge, isn't it? No single company can solve it all alone. You absolutely need diverse minds collaborating.
For sure. And while the technology for sharing data across that whole spectrum, from confidential internal stuff right up to public information, it largely exists, interoperability, getting things to work together smoothly, that's primarily a human problem, not really a technology problem at its core. Because standardizing the underlying data is just so challenging. You've got varied operational tech, different ways of describing things, network quirks. Companies worry, like we said, about comparing an apple with a pear when they try to share their unique data sets.
And in places like the UK, water companies face these intense, often competing pressures, don't they? From stakeholders, regulators like Ofwat, the Environment Agency, all while dealing with public opinion, sometimes negative press. It can make them a bit gun-shy about sharing information, maybe fearing how it'll be perceived.
Yeah, gun-shy is a good way to put it. So the crucial question becomes, how can the sector own the narrative? How can they navigate the potential criticism that inevitably comes with this kind of radical transparency?
The antidote, I think, has to be transparently communicating that bigger picture. It's about educating the public on the true value of water, its incredibly complex journey from source to tap, and the many adjacent industries that impact it. It's about owning that narrative. Look, the data, the history, it isn't perfect.
Yeah.
But we are taking these positive, proactive steps to open up, to bring collective knowledge together. It's almost an invitation, isn't it?
Yeah.
For the public to get involved, help solve these really difficult ecosystem challenges together.
And it's important to remember the professionals working in water, they're deeply passionate people. They are genuinely trying to do the right thing for water, for the environment. And actually, there's a lot of good news to share about their efforts, their stewardship of this vital resource.
And we can look to other sectors too, can't we? Ones that have clearly shown the benefits of open data. UK power networks, for example. Their open energy data led to entirely new products, new businesses popping up. Transport for London TfL. Their free open data was estimated to generate, what, up to £130 million a year in economic benefits? That's huge. And even NASA, the Hubble Space Telescope data, it becomes non-proprietary after just 6 months. Anyone can access it freely. That leads to whole new scientific discoveries, entire ecosystems built around a static data set.
And thinking even bigger, from a global perspective, look at Microsoft's planetary computer. It combines petabytes, massive amounts of global environmental data. Imagine the large-scale challenges we could potentially solve as water sectors around the world build these open data ecosystems. Ecosystems that could then flow into a kind of macro view of the entire planet. That's the true potential, the grand vision of open water.
So wrapping this up, what does this all mean for you? Open water is really a transformative approach. It leverages open source software, open data, open collaboration. And it specifically addresses the unique nature of the water sector as fundamentally a natural monopoly. It really seeks to unlock that collective intelligence, all those experts working on this shared, vital resource that affects every single one of us.
Yeah, knowledge is most valuable when it's understood and applied. And this deep dive, I think, clearly shows how shared knowledge, cooperative effort, they're absolutely essential. Essential for addressing global water challenges, accelerating innovation, improving accessibility, fostering sustainability, and ultimately promoting global water security.
So as you think about the journey of water from source to tap back again and the complex challenges it faces, maybe consider how these principles of open water, transparency, collaboration, the free sharing of information, how they could apply not just to our essential resources, but maybe to other global challenges you care about. How could it transform the way we collectively solve problems for a more sustainable future? Something to think about.